Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prizepicks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear, episode 304, presented by Prizepicks. My name is Conor Ryan. Once again, we are joined by the esteemed, the ever-knowledgeable Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
What's going on? Late breaking news here. As we are recording, I'm getting texts from ETD harassing me, telling me
shocking.
that he is too good looking and jacked to use my credential for the Four Nations face-off game. So he's not on Twitter, but he's still ruining my life. Everyone, please make note of ETD and how awful of a person he remains.
It is actually a cruel twist of fate, Ty, when you think about it. The fact that the plague of ETD 51 was removed forcibly from social media a few years ago. And yet, as he leaves, it's almost like a new plague has just swept into Twitter now since he's gone. Like maybe he needs to come back to create more order within the ecosystem there. I feel like if he does come back, it's only going to get a lot worse, though.
Yeah, it's like, these are people that we can't talk about now because of the world we live in. But, in 2002, Vince McMahon brought in NWO to kill the WWF. Like, it's kind of the same kind of concept. Or it's like in Jurassic World where you have to release the T-Rex to kill the Indominus Rex. So it's possible we have to consider these options here as we move forward.
Yeah. You know what I think about it, though? No, let's keep him off. We don't need ETD to... We already, run into him on the street. There was one time he ran into me at the Qdoba on Causeway before a game. I was rattled. I was trying to enjoy my extra chicken plate, my salad plate, whatever they have there. And all of a sudden, ETD comes up and confronts me. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to him before a game. I think they lost. Every time I've seen him, they lose. He's like a harbinger of doom. So maybe
that's Evan Marinofsky, though.
That's true. Maybe it's just that's the reason why. Maybe he has season tickets or he's just going to multiple games this year. That's why they keep on losing when you think about it.
That is true.
Food for thought.
We got to find out if he's been on the road games because that'd be the real test right there.
That is actually true. Yeah, there's something going wrong there. As we break down the plague that is ETD 51 and how he's dismantled this Bruins season, Ty, there's not a whole lot to actually talk about with the hockey team in Boston, which might be a good thing because last week was a pretty dreadful, pretty awful way to end going into the Four Nations break with those two losses against New York and Vegas. And I think we've already harped on what went down in those games, both terrible. I think we're in the same boat that Saturday's loss to Vegas, worst loss of the year. I understand that people look at the Buffalo game. You can look at the Ottawa game on the road, and those suck. And also Buffalo is not a playoff team, so that one was a tough pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that game against Vegas, I think especially where you have that loss with the stakes where they are, and also the fact that you now have this long break to marinate. It's kind of like that win against Washington right before the holidays, where it's you felt really good. Christmas was great because you're like, you know what? Maybe this team is going to get its act together. That was a great competitive game against a good Washington team. They're going to be fine. Now we're just stewing on that loss against Vegas for 2 weeks. Doesn't feel great. I think that is the worst loss of the year.
Yeah, and it's also the manner in which you lost that game, where you're holding a lead through 40 minutes. You should feel good about where you're at. You give up the game tying goal and what would have been the go ahead goal for Vegas, and you win the challenge, right? That's like winning a life, right? And then you lose it 30 seconds later. Just the dynamics of that gut punch, I think, make it the worst loss of the season. It's different. Like Halloween in Carolina, yeah, they got their faces kicked in, but you knew that game was over after 20 minutes, 25 minutes. You were 70 seconds away from getting at least 1 point, a point that you desperately needed, one that you wanted because you'd enter the break in a playoff spot. You'd enter feeling pretty good. You get nothing. And that's sort of, I think it's a greater picture kind of conversation too, right? Where if you go to that Wednesday game against the Rangers, you lose that after leading after 40 minutes of play. Okay, well, entering play, you were 16-0-4 when leading after 2 periods. So that's 36 of a possible 40 points. It's not perfect, but it's damn close to it, right? You lose that game in that fashion, and you lose Saturday in that fashion. It's okay, that's if you apply that math, that you should have got 3 out of 4 points there, right? If you follow the similar trends that you have all season long, you should get three or 4 points out of that. Those points are so valuable, and to lose them in the way you're losing them, that's what makes it the worst loss of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's not a great way to go into this extended break. The Bruins have quite the hole to climb out of. It's almost like it's the Dark Knight Rises at this point. They are fighting through it to get out of that pit. I think Money Puck now has the Bruins at 14.9%. I'm not a bet man, Ty, but that's not great. I don't think you want to be at 14.9% with 25 games to go. I know you kind of ran the numbers on 98.5 The Sports Hub, but it's not insurmountable, but vibes aren't looking that great right now when you just look at the numbers. They can work, but you put yourself in a tough spot.
You basically need a minimum of 30 points over the final 26 games of the season. So if you want to keep it simple, that's 15 wins. If you want to do it in a sort of convoluted 2024-25 Bruins manner, they could, in theory, get in by going 12-8-6 over the final 26 games of the year, which technically is under 500, but you'd get enough points there where you should be able to qualify. And something to consider there, I think, honestly, Connor, is that the teams that are chasing them or that they are chasing, for the most part, all have a more difficult schedule than the Bruins do down the stretch. Now, the Bruins have found a way to make winnable games unwinnable at times this year, I know, but Detroit might crater back down to earth, man, because their schedule, the second half, is wild. It is absolutely insane. They have a full season slate against Carolina, Vegas, Minnesota. They have 2 against Florida. They have 2 against Washington. Like, that is not an easy way to end their season. They also have some 4-point swing games, too. They have 2 against Columbus, I think. So those are going to be really intense games. So we'll see what happens there. But there's a pathway for the Bruins to sort of backdoor their way in. It's going to be really difficult, though, and it begins, with a pretty difficult stretch, I would say. You got some teams that would love to bury you, or teams that are trying to stay afloat, like yourself. So it's going to be really hard, but they can't afford more of what you saw on Wednesday and Saturday. Like, you got to get every possible freaking point you can, and that's what makes it hard, right? We've talked about this before, that the unsustainability of their model right now is what's making it difficult to forecast them actually making the playoffs.
Yeah, no, it is an uphill climb, to say the least. They won't return to play until next Saturday, the 22nd, against the Anaheim Ducks, a game that they should win. But again, what have we seen from this team? Jekyll and Hyde, we have no idea. So we will see how that plays out. Ty, looking at what is going on right now in hockey, I think we're all in agreement that thank the good Lord, the hockey gods, wherever you may pray to, that we don't have an all-star weekend. We don't have a skills competition of Nikita Kucherov going through the motions. So far, at least through 2 games, Four Nations face-off seems like the real deal. Players have bought in. The fans have bought in, obviously. And I think you look at how the NHL is mapping it out, not just this year, but the fact we're going to have Olympics next year, World Cup of Hockey back. I think you look at just how much fatigue there is across, I think, multiple sports for like all-star games and that stuff. This does seem to be like the winning formula in terms of what the NHL has to do. They love shooting themselves in the foot and also getting away from things that work, but it does feel like this is the right way to go about things and break up some of the monotony of an 82-game season.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it really kind of highlights what a mistake it was for the NHL to back out of international play because it was in China or Korea. It's like, no, I get the time zone thing is what it is, but you went to Sochi in 2014, and that also had a similar kind of time zone difference there. So your fans will tune in, right? If the quality is there, the fans will tune in, and quality is there. I mean, this is an absolutely fantastic tournament. I said it a few months ago when we first talked about it. I do wish Russia was involved. I do wish the Czech team was involved. Like, it's kind of a bummer that they're not. But what you're getting right now, I mean, Canada and USA is going to be must-watch TV, right?
It's gonna be unreal.
And think about that. Like, has there been any NHL game this year that you've looked at and said that's must-watch TV? Like no. Like they're rarer and rarer, especially in the regular season. To your point, so yeah, to break it up with this play, I think it's great. It's about building on it. It's about not watering it down and making it insanely gimmicky, which, as you alluded to, is sometimes a problem for this league. But I loved it. I mean, I gotta admit, like, I don't mind World Juniors, but I'm more international pro best on best than I am World Junior.
The big dogs.
Exactly. It's nothing against World Juniors, but it's there's something about seeing like a guy that is synonymous with an NHL team wearing his country's jersey. That is just really cool. It's different. Like, this is my first time seeing Connor McDavid, the pro, wearing a Team Canada jersey. Like think about that. That's kind of wild that it's taken this long, but here we are.
Yeah. And I think you look at just both those games, even though USA Finland ended up being a blowout, and really what didn't open up till the third period there when that Kachuk line, horrifying. That is a terrifying line for any team to go up against. And then you've seen where people are looking at Team USA as potentially the team to beat in terms of just how deep they're at every position, but that added physicality of just those guys together on the ice, even like guys like JT Miller, Trocheck. You do have a little bit of sandpaper, I think, to that USA team, but whether it be that game or Canada, Sweden, which was another classic, a great way to open up the tournament too, because I feel like, as is the case with every like NHL event, whether it's like Winter Classic, anything like that, or even there's people are like, oh, it's just gimmicky, like who cares? And then you see the game itself, you're like, I'm all in. What else kind of stood out to you from those two games in terms of players or anything else that really caught your eye?
I think that you can't take penalties against Canada. That is the most obvious thing in the world. I like the U.S. roster a lot in this tournament. And I like it because of what you mentioned, like the physicality, the just overwhelming intensity. I'd like them more if they had Quinn Hughes, obviously, but you look at the way that they can really get interior ice, I think is going to be really beneficial against a Canadian team that, especially on the back end, wants to play really up-tempo and kind of go. Like, if you can wear them down a little bit, that'll be interesting to watch. Finland, I feel bad for Finland because it feels like they are by far sort of the worst team in this tournement. And it's through no fault of their own. Too. Yeah, exactly. Like they I think they lost another defenseman too, I want to say. Ristolainen, did they lose him? I think it was.
I think so, yeah.
So like they're not playing with a full deck right now. Like Euro Vakanainen would not be on their roster. No disrespect to Vakanainen. Shout out 2018 2017 first round pick Euro Vakanainen. But they're going up against it, right? It's kind of obvious to watch them play. I'm excited to see Sweden and the U.S. as well. I think that's and I'm excited because I kind of want to see what happens with JT Miller and Elias Pettersson. I just want to see that head to head really badly. But I mean, I just think it's Canada and U.S. I think that's, if Sweden was fully healthy, I think, especially in goal, I think I would give them more credit, more respect. I would say watch out for them. I still might to a degree, but I feel like Canada and U.S. they're just so well rounded and they're so well built that it's going to be hard to see another team coming in and knocking them off. Personally, in my opinion.
Yeah, I saw a tweet that was like, I can respect JT Miller because the guy laces up his skates and immediately becomes fucking pissed at everyone, which I was like, that kind of does seem like what JT Miller is. Yeah, I agree. I think it's great for the game. It's great to break up that monotony, and it's something that, like, you look at, like, even the NBA with, like, their in-season tournament, that these leagues are so desperate to have something that can catch your eye as a fan and something that's different. And, like, the hockey, again, it's frustrating because it's taken them so long to embrace this, but you look at this and you look at what next year, the NHL, even though they're approving it, like, they still have the ups and downs of the Olympic participation. But as a hockey fan, how excited is it to then have like a 2-week break to watch the Olympics, and then in 28 have the World Cup where you're going to be able to have, hopefully, the Czech team or maybe the Russian team, or like the German team, like where the World Cup of Hockey, you can have hopefully more international players outside of the NHL, so you can actually put together a roster. Like, I think that's great for the game. It's great for hockey fans. And, it's the NBA in-season tournament, like the players have invested because there's like a bunch of money involved, but like, it's still just like, all right, we'll do it. We'll break things up. And like the NHL is just trying to get you to buy in. I think an international best on best for hockey, you don't need to get the buy-in from the players. They've been waiting for this opportunity. And I think you've seen it. And it does feel like it is a win-win for everyone involved. Also, my big takeaway in terms of a player, can someone rescue Sidney Crosby from Pittsburgh? He is so fucking good, dude. He is unbelievable. It's unreal how smart he is on the ice.
Oh, he's unbelievable. And it's one of those things where, growing up as a fan, I was like, oh, Sidney Crosby, but then you watch him and you're like, oh, wow, he's actually incredible, and I think what's been great about him is that he thinks the game at such a high level that it cancels out some of the things that you'd worry about a guy getting older, approaching 40 years old, whatever it is, 36, 37. Like the way he thinks the game is just still so incredible, and it makes him such a weapon out there. My only complaint that I would have is, does John Cooper know that he's not coaching the Lightning and he's coaching Team USA? I don't want to see Anthony Cirelli and Brendan Hagel that much in overtime, in a 3-on-3 overtime. Like, what the hell are we doing here? You have literally the best team possible in the world, and you're subjecting me, the viewer, to Brendan Hagel and Anthony Cirelli in overtime. Why? I don't want that. I don't need that. I don't want that. So that's my only complaint through 2 games so far as we record this.
Yes, very few complaints so far. And again, as you said, Saturday night, USA Canada must watch. Hopefully we get USA Canada again on next Thursday in Boston, because that would be unbelievable to have that matchup in a championship game. Ty, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Bruins, but before we do that, take a quick break, hear from our friends over at Prizepicks. Football season might be over, but there's still plenty to look forward to on the sports calendar. So hit the ice this hockey season with Prizepicks, the best place to win cash while watching your favorite sports. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash as you run your game all season long on Prizepicks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prizepicks. Think Connor McDavid will get more than 0.5 goals next week? Will Austin Matthews hit for more than 5 shots on goal? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this hockey season when you and your crew run your game on Prizepicks. Prizepicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I get my money as quick as 15 minutes. Prizepicks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. There's no shortage of ways to participate in Prizepicks. This week, I'm looking at the hockey board and selecting David Pastrnak for more than 1 goal and Brady Tkachuk for more than 5 hits. It's really that easy. So download the Prizepicks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prizepicks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. Shout out once again to our good friends over at Prizepicks. All right, Ty, looking at this Bruins team, we still have 7 total games to go until the deadline. We figured, and you brought up a great idea for a format as we kind of look at potential trade chips, guys that could be moved for the Bruins. We're looking at a little bit of a game: trade, hold, or extend. So I'm going to give you a player, and we'll go back and forth with this, but give you a player. You tell me whether you think the Bruins should trade them, hold on to them, or extend them. And so it's going to be either guys that are pending UFAs, or it's something where it's a player who could be an appealing trade chip, a guy with a year or so left on his deal. So let's start with
hold essentially means we're holding them for the stretch run, but we're not overly concerned with keeping them around, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. So leading off, let's get with the obvious one. Brad Marchand. Are you trading? You holding on to him? You extended him?
I'm extending him. I am signing him to an extension. I do not believe the Bruins have enough internal weaponry to handle his loss on the ice from a production standpoint and from a leadership standpoint. This is a player who, in our conversations in the past, has made it clear that he wants to be here for his entire career. He's made it clear that he wants to play into his 40s. And right now, I mean, look at his production. He's on pace for a 30-goal season. The Bruins, if they are short on one thing, it is guys who can score 30 goals and can score as naturally as he can. So I am extending him, to be honest with you. I think that unless somebody knocks me over, and I'm talking about a first-round pick plus a top prospect, I am hanging on to him, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you have to extend him. And I think I will gladly fess up and I will accept if I have egg on my face in terms of the Bruins, where they are a year or so from now. But I think also if the Bruins look at this year and they end up selling off assets and punting on this year, if that is what they end up doing, remains to be seen if that is the course they end up charting out. But if they eventually wave the white flag and be like, training camp was fucked, or nothing went right, guys regressed this year, just ain't it. I still think they are operating with the assumption that if this is a retool, we got to be bold, but we can get right back at it next year. We've got a fucking 28-year-old Pastrnak. We got Swayman. We got McAvoy. Let's uproot a lot of this. Let's get into the guts of the roster and see what we can do. But they think they can be back. And I think Brad Marchand's a guy that even if he continues to be kind of a guy that ends up being more of just a reliable middle six player, I think you look at his even production at that level, his leadership, what he brings on and off the ice. I think that is something that is key for this team. Like if you had like another wave of established veterans in the room, maybe it's part of the uncomfortable transition you have to get into with like really overhauling this team. But I still think he's a guy that can help you out right now and for the next couple of years. So I wouldn't be surprised if like there's like a 3-year extension in the works or something like that. Like I don't think it's going to be like the Bergeron 1 year. Do it like that. If he does stay, and I think he wants to stay, I think it's something that clears up in terms of what his future is. That I think he wants to play for the next couple of years. He's motivated. He wants to be playing in the 26 Olympics. And I think you even see him with Canada, like how much he's moving his feet, how much he's being a shit stirrer. Like there's still a lot of value to what he brings. So unless it is an insane offer you're getting for him from a really desperate team, I'm keeping on and I'm extending him. I agree.
Yeah, I just think that you sort of look at him and there's not a lot of guys that you have coming up that can replace what he does. And that's a big factor for me. And, I think Team Canada right now is kind of highlighting, how Brad Marchand should be playing, at this stage of his career. It'd be great if he was like a charged up third liner. Right. And he was scoring at will and really sort of feasting on matchups. I mean, that's not who he's going to be on Boston. I understand that. But I just think that you don't have the internal ability to replace that guy right now on and off the ice. And so I want to keep him. That's what I would do. But, at the same time, like he is your most valuable chip. I understand that. I just think that this is somebody that I would want to be with the Bruins beyond this year, if only because he's just a critical part of your offense, and your offense is terrible. And so, like, I don't want to take away more offensive weapons. I just don't.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll see what happens there. I think he stays, and I think I wouldn't even be surprised if you get like an extension in the works. I know there's been some rumblings that they're working on a deal, or I think Raycroft might have mentioned that. So we'll see what happens there. But I wouldn't be surprised if he also just signs at some point this season, like just to get that narrative out of the way. Looking at another guy who is also a pending or soon to be UFA, Trent Frederic. You trading, you holding, you extending.
I am trading. I'm trading. I get it. He's a first round pick that you've developed into a notable asset. But I think what you're seeing this year is kind of more in line with what he probably is. It's not a knock on him. It's just, he had a 2-year bender there where he shot almost 15%, right? He had 35 goals and 70 points and 160 games, I think it was. Like, in this year, he has 8 goals and 15 points through almost 60 games. And I just look at that guy and I say that teams can get stupid and they can overpay for his attributes at the deadline. Ironically enough, I've said it before, I think, but like the Bruins would be that team that would look at him and go, oh my God, 20 goal potential and he fights and he's physical and we got to get that guy in here. It's like, okay, yeah, but it's just not consistent enough. I think he is what he is. I trust the Bruins' ability to find a guy to bring in who can play the wing and score 15 to 20 goals. I think that you could do that. You could find that kind of guy. And I'm just terrified of his next contract, to be honest with you. That's a big factor for me. I don't know if I want to pay him what he could get with an exploding cap and with the years that he had before this year, right? And so if you're going to sign a contract with the hope that this guy bounces back to what he was before he signed the contract, well, that's usually it's kind of a fool's errand sometimes. So I would see the market, and if it's a market short on buyers and you got some teams that are very win now that would like him, like say a Winnipeg, for example, I am willing to swallow that and to accept the return and trade that player. Because I also think, Connor, sorry to go on here, but you got Riley Duran, you got Trevor Kuntar, you got not the same player type, I know, but Georgi Merkulov, like Fabian Lysell, like you got some guys that in theory should project to be physical wingers or guys that can come and score 18 goals for you. So I think you're more equipped to handle trading a guy like that and not having it derail your organization per se. So that's why I'm on board with trading a guy like Frederic.
Yeah, I agree that I think you have to trade him. I think you got to look at the way this market is, the fact that even though it has not been a strong year for him, it does seem like a lot of teams really do covet that skill set. And I think if you're a Bruins team that is looking to maximize the value, and also you might have reservations about whether you want to keep that guy long term, right? Like, then I think you have to read the market and see what you could get for a guy like that. It's almost like if the Bruins were in the spot they're in this year, but they had like a pending UFA like DeBrusk. I feel like they'd be like, well, I don't think we're going to keep him. So like, yeah, it's going to make us worse right now. Maybe we are raising the white flag, but if we can get a first for him, like we're moving him. I don't think you're getting a first for Frederic. I think the way he's playing, but like, I mean, that's what my assumption would be. There's who knows how desperate teams get in terms of a buyer's market. But even if it is a scenario where you move on from Frederic, you don't have to give him that next contract. You're able to, the rest of the season, the final 20-ish games, see what a guy like Merkulov can do, see what a guy like Riley Duran could do. Two different skill sets with guys that you at least get an idea of what they could provide in a similar role. And you get like a second-round pick or something like that, and it gives you a chance to, you know, as much as people look at the first round and there's a lot of, you know, players that maybe don't have that super high ceiling of, you know, the Bruins, like if they get the 13th pick, like you could get a top 6 player, but I don't know if you're getting a franchise guy down there, right? Like it does feel like it's very top heavy, but it does feel like there's a lot of high floor talent on this draft, especially in the first 2 rounds. I know Bruins fans don't want to hear that, but you look at, and I haven't done a deep dive yet, but just looking at like guys coming in to Hockey East next year, there's some guys in the second round, like BU's got a 6'6" right shot defenseman coming in, Carter Amico, who's really physical player with some good puck moving skills. BU's got a guy, Simon Wang, who's from Beijing, who's 6'6", puck moving defenseman, like a guy like that. They've got a few guys from the national teams that are not first round talent, but skilled offensive wingers that are going to go to BU and BC next year that should, you know, provide a lot of value there. If you can move Frederic, get a pick like that, and have someone that you can add to the system that you can project is going to be on the team in 3-4 years time, I think you do that move. And if Merkulov and those guys don't pan out, you can address it in the offseason with another middle 6 winger if it comes to that as well. So I think the writing is on the wall that you move on from Frederic and see what you can get in terms of a draft pick or something from a pretty desperate team, I think.
Yeah, and think about some teams that we have seen. We saw one recently, Minnesota. Think about Minnesota and look at Minnesota's lines right now. They went out and claimed Vinny Hinostroza off waivers last week before the break to bring him in because like their middle 6 is a little kind of wonky right now. You look at their team, like Freddie doesn't make a ton of money. Maybe that helps a team like Winnipeg facilitate a trade there to bring a guy like that in. Billy Guerin is a GM who I think really I think he does like heft. Look at the way he's built Team USA. Like I could see the Wild being a trade partner for the Bruins that could make some sense for a guy like Trent Frederic if the Bruins do decide to trade him. And for Minnesota, it's a guy that could make a lot of sense and be an upgrade over what they currently have in their middle six right now.
Yep. No, I agree. I think that you look at the writing on the wall there with Frederick. I think you would get some good draft capital for him. A guy that I think is a little bit divisive in terms of what the best path is. Morgan Geekie, guy who's been good this year, is an RFA and is due to get paid, but the team does have some control. Are you trading? You holding on to him? You extended him?
This might be a hot take. This might be. I am making a final pitch to him ahead of the deadline. And if you can't find common ground and work out a deal, I'm trading him. Because I think that, if you're going to have an aggressive retool or a rebuild on the fly, whatever you want to call it, you have to be a bit cutthroat. You have to be a bit aggressive in terms of pump and dump and things of that nature. You got Morgan Geekie. You brought him in on a 2-year deal for $2.5 million per. Okay, if you can't find common ground after that, well then you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be happy with what you're paying him, or he's not going to be happy with what he's being offered. So pump and dump. Get something while you still can. I at the same time, like I love Morgan Geekie. I'd like to keep him, but I think you have to be very aggressive and you have to say, this is what we think you're worth. How do you feel? If you don't agree, okay, well, your value's never been higher for us, so we got to make a move here. Like, I think that's the tricky spot of where they're at right now as an organization. And so I am making one final pitch, and if it's not accepted, pump and dump time, baby. Trade them out. Bring in some assets.
Yep. No, I'll go with extend, but with the caveat that I think you're pretty much on the same wavelength of what the final payout's going to be. I know like they have like those contract projections, and granted that was before they announced the cap was spiking, but it had him at like $325 million. Like if that's the case, if it's under 4 and he just wants some security here for like a 4+ year deal for a guy who's 26 and has that control, I would do that, because I think you look at, yes, like he works with Pastrnak, which is already a plus, but even if like you find more talent to put with Pastrnak moving forward, I still think he can bring value as a guy you can, plug in on the third line and be a dependable player that's going to be physical, can lay some hits, can, even if he has a year away from Pastrnak, I think on a normal year where they have a stable forward core, that might be asking a lot, but he could be a 15-goal, 40-ish point guy, I think, regularly, depending on whether or not you juice him up his numbers with Pastrnak. So I think he's a guy that you look at also just the lack of depth at the wing right now. He's someone you want to keep because he's a versatile piece that can, play with your big guns, but can move down if needed. But it's going to come down to the price. And because of the cap jumping up, he's like, all right, $5 million. It's like, I'm not doing that. So I think it all comes down to what exactly he's asking for and what that final price is. But I think ideally you'd want to keep him as a guy that can kind of be that Swiss Army knife for you. I think he's effective in a lot of different roles, played well in the playoffs. He's I think, sneaky underrated player in terms of how physical he is. And you look at like the Bruins and their mindset, right, of like they wanted to get much more tougher and guys that are really physical. And you look at the Zadorovs and the Frederics, you look at like just the way Geekie plays, those are the guys that tend to play well in the playoffs. And he actually had a strong playoff off of just moving his feet, being aggressive, landing hits, and playing simple hockey. And I think you need some of those players further down your depth chart.
Yeah. Like to be clear, I do not want to trade him. It's just I would really hate for it to be you don't trade him and he goes cold, and then you have a contract impasse, and then you end up trading him for, or you don't qualify him, like whatever other fallout there could be. It's just I want to know how close they are to a contract extension, and if they're not close, make the trade. Because again, when you have a retool on the fly, or you have any of these kind of, whatever, it requires a bit of aggression, right? And so I got to see that manifested in some fashion for the Bruins with how they do business. And if you're not close on a guy who's performing well, make the call and get some assets in while you can, right? And I think that's where I land with him more than anything else. So I want him back. I just feel like you got to know where you stand. And if you're not close, then you trade him.
Yep. No, that's going to be a really fascinating one because I do feel like there's a lot of teams that would probably covet him in terms of the way he plays, productions he's had with top 6 players, and also the security of him being an RFA, and you do have some control there. So we'll see how that plays out. A guy who does have term, but could be an appealing trade chip, Charlie Coyle. Where do you stand on him? I know this obviously isn't a extend or something like that, but is he a guy that you keep, or do you see what you can get for him in a deal?
I'm surveying the market on him. I'm seeing what somebody wants to give me for him. You know, Adam Henrique got a first-round pick a year ago. I know he was a pending UFA, different circumstances, I know, but there's a team out there that would be poised to pick up Charlie Coyle's 5.25, and it wouldn't be a backbreaker for them. And they'd get a player that can either feast on a third line or move into a top 6 kind of wing role in a pinch if you need him to. Can be a matchup nightmare, right? A puck possession guy, obviously. He's been really good here. I guess my whole thing would be, I don't think the Bruins are going to get any better out of Charlie Coyle than they did a year ago. And when I reference that aggression and making moves that it might make you go, ugh, I don't like losing that guy, but I love the return. Like, that might be one of those kind of moves, that I look at moving a guy like that. And I say, if you can get a top 64 pick plus for a player like that and free up some money for a guy who's turning 33 or already did. I know it's coming up soon, or it already happened. That makes it a much harder conversation. And that's why I'd be more willing to do that if I were the Bruins. And so I'm listening. The aggressiveness, I'm moving with that. Depends on how the Bruins look out of the gate here. If they drop 3 out of 5, I'm like, all right, listen on everybody. And that's kind of like, that's what's interesting here, Connor, is that, talking to people, I've been told like they're listening on pretty much everybody right now. There's only a few guys that they're looking at and going, no, like we're building around that guy, or no, we're not moving him. Like there's a lot of names on the table right now, I think, for the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to it. For a lot of these players, you can look at the Marchands, we can look at the Frederics, guys like that who are UFAs. But in terms of moving guys with term, guys that have been here for a while, and a guy I think we'll talk about next is Brendan Carlo. But just to finish the Coyle thought, I think it depends on just what the return is, because you can move, I think, on from a guy like Frederic and still see what you have the rest of this year, see what a guy like Markulov or Lysell can give you in that role, and get a draft pick and kind of stay the course if you want to be just a soft seller. If you're moving like guys like Coyle or Carlo, you are dismantling parts of your roster that have been here for a long time. And it might signal that you are kind of waving the white flag, but I think it comes down to just what the return is. If you're moving Coyle, but you're able to get like a late first or something like that from a team like, I'll spitball and say like a team like Edmonton, a team that could look at a puck possession Swiss Army knife guy that can really dominate matchups in the third line. I'm sure, like, if the Bruins traded Coyle, whatever team he'd go to, there'd be fans being like, look at his numbers. I think you can look at Coyle, and we've seen him a lot of years now, and be like, the numbers don't always reflect how impactful he can be with the puck on his stick and how much he does make guys around him better. So he is a useful asset. It just depends on what the return is. If it's like a second or something like that, I'm not sure about that, but if there is a team that really could use his services and it ends up getting you a first or 2 seconds or a really good prospect or a younger player in return, I think you do have to listen on any one of those offers, because it's tough, because it's a guy that's been in for a while, local guy, great dude. That is not what the Bruins have to factor in when it comes to these decisions, but I think it all comes down to just what the market is and what the return could be. It's all about just getting this team better. If they were second in the Atlantic right now and cruising and doing what we thought they were going to do this year, which is building off of the promise of last year, we wouldn't be having these conversations. But this is the hand the Bruins have been dealt, and a lot of it's their own doing. So you do have to look at it in that regard. And pivoting off of that, for a guy like Brendan Carlo, who Emily Kaplan mentioned on Saturday's broadcast, that he's a guy that a lot of teams have been calling the Bruins about, has 2 years left after this year at 4.1 million.
Yep.
A guy that a lot of teams would covet, as I know it hasn't been his strongest year, but stay at home, PK, can really bolster a lot of teams' decor. Would you listen to the market for a guy like Brendan Carlo?
So here's where I land with Brandon Carlo. I think if you're moving Brandon Carlo, it has to be part of a hockey trade. You have to bring in somebody else because you really value them, or they're in a spot where their upcoming contract is not going to match what their current team is willing to pay them. And so you're giving something up that you don't want to lose, but you're bringing something in that you need. And so I think that's where Carlo sort of differentiates from the other guys we've mentioned so far, where is if I'm willing to trade him, but basically only if I'm getting something that I know addresses a long-term need. Not just futures, not just lottery tickets. Like, I got to know what I'm bringing in here. And so I know this podcast, we've talked about Alex Tuck. I know that was more of a buy now move for the Bruins. Maybe not so much a Carlo kind of trade, but a player of that ilk. A 6'5", a 6'2", 6'5" wing who has natural offensive abilities, right? Find that guy out there, whoever that guy is, whether it's a pending RFA, a guy with some term. Then I listen on a guy like Brandon Carlo, I think for sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't trade him for a first or anything like that, because I also think you move on from Carlo and he has his detractors, but I think there is a sizable question of moving forward how you address his absence, like a top 4 right shot behind McAvoy. That's not just you plug in Andrew Peak, or you don't have a guy waiting in the wings
right.
Years past, right? That is something where you have to you're creating another hole there. So it's only a move you make, I think, if you've got, as you said, you acquire a forward, a wing, someone that is part of your next wave, right? That is already an NHL player, can give you 20 goals, can be a key piece moving forward, right? That's the only thing I would do if the Bruins are serious about it. If it's moving him for a first, listen, you'll take it. Your prospect pipeline is what it is, but to move an asset like that isn't so easy to replace, unless you want to do it in the aggregate or something this offseason. I think it has to be for a guy that isn't going to help you a year from now. Is part of your new revamped supporting cast around your core pieces, a guy that has term and you can build around moving forward. So that will be interesting to see how that all plays out. Is there anyone else, Ty, that comes to mind for you, or any final thoughts of guys or we've talked about in terms of what you think the path should be for him?
I mean, real quick, when you talk about Carlo, who's their top right shot D prospect behind? It's Jackson Edward, right? Is Edward even a righty, or is he a lefty? I know that Freddie Brunet is a lefty. The kid they drafted, who's currently playing at Quinnipiac, he's a lefty.
Yeah.
So it's a tough spot to try to replace. And the other part of it too with Carlo, the contract is not prohibitive, and that's why I'm reluctant to move on from a guy like that, because Will Borgen just signed for the same exact contract that Carlo has. I would rather have Brandon Carlo than Will Borgen. Then that might be a me thing, a stylistic thing, I admit, but I think that that's why it's not just sell off his contract. No, because you got to replace that player, and so if you're doing that, you got to know what you're bringing in is legit, versus just we're getting a pair of seconds. No, that's not good enough. I want to know what you're bringing in. So that's where I land with that. Another guy that we didn't really mention, who's kind of fallen off the face of the earth here, is Justin Brazeau. No idea what they do with that. I know there was reporting recently that the Bruins had talked contract, but talks had gone quiet. So we'll see what happens there. But basically, like I said, everyone is on the table right now for the most part. I would say everybody except for, I think, 3 or 4 guys are currently on the table for this team. One guy I'd be curious about would be Jonas Korpisalo. Like if someone calls and they need a goalie and they're a playoff team, or they're trying to stay afloat and they're running out of options, I would probably listen there, because it's a lot of money to commit to a guy that you're currently playing, 25 games a year, it feels like. You also have Michael DiPietro in the minors playing well right now. Do you want to get a look at him before he leaves? like
Mhm.
there's something there as well. And so I think that I would listen on Corpusalo if someone wants to come in and bowl you over, so to speak, on a return.
Yep. Plenty of decisions the Bruins have to make in the next couple of weeks. Ty, as we brace ourselves for the trade deadline, what can we look forward to from you over at 95 The Sports Hub, and where can we hear you on the airwaves?
Yeah, you can read a lot more of kind of what we just talked about today on this podcast. What their plans are at the deadline, what could be on the table, what is on the table, what is off the table, and all of that. And we'll also have some Four Nations coverage. I will be in the building beginning on Monday, and as well for the championships. You can find me there. How about yourself?
Yes, you can read all my stuff over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have covered every step of the way this Bruins season. You can also follow me on Twitter, X, whatever it's called, at Conor Ryan _93. This was episode 304 of Poke the Bear. I'm Conor Ryan. That is Ty Anderson. You fans have a great rest of your week.